Hard to believe, isn't it, how far we have come in Greek? Now you're at chapter 19, and we begin to think about a new part of speech, yet with the verbs, and now a new tense form, the future. We've thought about the present, and we have thought about the contract nature of some verbs and how vowels contract, and here now the future. Let's pray as we begin. Lord, encourage students, give them continued discipline as they work through tense forms. Help them to remember nouns as well and think back about case endings, prepositions, adjectives, pronouns. Help them in their Greek text as they read in English. Help them to have the Greek text open and begin to connect the dots and gain traction. I ask in Christ's name, amen. Thinking about the specificity again of verbs. This is something we have noted along the way, and we have already touched base on the present. We'll come to the perfect soon enough, but right here we're in the future. And what distinguishes the future is what we're going to come to discover as the tense formative. See that sigma? That sigma is going to help form the future tense and the active and also the middle. Now we'll get to these other tense stems in due course, but just recognize how one particular word here, and just as we have in English, we have the present, I love, I'm continuing to love in a general kind of statement. We have the future, I will love, but we have some nuances. What we're going to learn is the imperfect, I was loving. We have that idea coming across in English as well, but there's a specific tense form for that in Greek. The aorist, a very general way of speaking, I loved, often with a past time, and then we'll think about the perfect and look at those as we progress. But for now, just the future here that we're going to be looking at. There's a future involved, looking to a time that is yet to come, and that is signaled by the sigma. Keeping in mind, just as we've reviewed all the way through, and we'll see why here today as we're in chapter 19, I've noted along the way, the present tense stem is not the base of Greek verbs. The verbal root is, and Mounce cues us to that with the asterisk. That's our root, and it's from this root that we get particular stems. And sometimes there might be more than one root, more than one asterisk for the same word, and we're going to see that even here in chapter 19. It's here we get to the future, and there are some verbs that have a root that is taken for the present and a different root for the future, and that is why I have shown this slide over and over and called your attention to page 450 and following, because I want you to have this perspective that the verbal root is again the base, and from the root or roots we get the stems. Our typical example that we have looked at along the way here, we have our ground, and beneath the ground we have a root, we have a tree here, and then off of this tree there are particular stems. And if you have the text open to page 450, if not, grab your text and just pause the screencast for a minute, and you can recall that that first column is the present, the second column, the future active and middle, then the third column, the aorist active and middle, then the aorist, or excuse me, the perfect active is the fourth column, and then the fifth column, perfect middle passive, aorist and future passive, the sixth column. So those columns represent the basic formations of the root stem combination. And if you grab page 454 for just a moment, grab page 454 and let me just erase these here so that we can walk through and again see an example. But if you look at 454 and we think about the word erchomai, there are two different roots. One over here and then eliyuth. Epsilon, lambda, epsilon, upsilon, theta. And we have over here, epsilon, rho, and chi. Well, we have the stem, or excuse me, the root there. It's marked by the asterisk, the root here. And we have our tree, and we have the various stems coming off. And as I noted, I believe in a previous screencast, erchomai goes to the present, and that is the only stem that uses the erch root. The future active that we will look at here today uses eliyuth right here. The aorist active in middle, eliyuth. The perfect active, same. Now these two, the aorist and future passive, the 6th column and the 5th column are blank, don't occur in the New Testament, but we see here that only the present uses erch. So this is why, again, we have this distinction between the verbal root and the tense stems. Components of a verb, again, we start with the stem, and it's the most basic form, carries the root's meaning into a particular sentence. Then we have the connecting vowel, omicron and epsilon are our pattern. Again, whether we're in the active or middle passive, omicron, epsilon, OEE, and then omicron, epsilon, omicron, OEO. So we would have right there our active and middle passives. And then the personal endings, and it's where the ending, it's again the ending that specifies person and number, so that we can recall that each verb is a self-contained unit. We have a subject embedded because of those endings. Now there might be a subject outside. If so, it would have to match with those. If we have a singular verb, we're going to have a singular subject outside. Components of the verb, again, just another slide to express pretty much the same idea that we have looked at in a different format. We start with a root, and then we have our stem. If we're looking at luo, lu's our stem, and it's the same root for the present and the future. So pretty basic here as we begin to think about the future. And the tense formative is the key component that we think about with the change, if you will, outside of the present into different stems. And the future active tense formative is this sigma. After that, we add the connecting vowel and then the personal ending. So if we're thinking of the active, we have the active endings, and this is the first person plural ending. Future active indicative, lu somen. We will loose or destroy. And our key word with the future is the word will in our translations. And again, that sigma is our tense formative. Our personal endings, remember, sementi nsi and mai sai tai, methasitha entai, and we recall that that psi needs our attention because we have that epsilon here and that epsilon. Let me draw that a little more clearly. That epsilon places this sigma between two vowels. It drops out, and then this alpha forces that epsilon to become an eta, iota subscripts, contraction over the top, lue is our result. We remember that pattern, and it may be helpful to go back and look at chapter 17 on contract verbs again, and just review those principles as we progress. So the present active indicative, just as a recall here, again, we have our connecting vowel pattern. That doesn't change with the future, as we'll see. I'm just putting this slide up just yet for review as we're thinking about then the future. And here's what the future looks like. Here we have our sigma tense formative, sigma, 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 all the way down. Right after the stem, so we have stem, and then we add that sigma, and then we have our connecting vowel, and then endings. So all the way down, we have our endings still the same, OEE, OEO, and our keyword will all the way through. You will loose, we will, you all will, they will. So if you can keep in mind what you already know from the present, the basic idea of the pattern of verbs with a stem, and following the stem we have a tense formative here, but the connecting vowel, that's similar to what we had in the present. This is exactly the same, personal endings. What distinguishes the future then is this sigma that we see here. Components of the future middle indicative. There it is again, sigma. That is our tense formative for the future active and middle. We will see that there's a different tense formative for the future passive. That's why we're not talking about it yet. We're just talking about the future active and middle, and that tense formative is the sigma. So we keep in mind that there's a root that leads to a stem in a particular tense form, and here, if we're thinking about por uomai, por uo is going to be our stem. We put on the sigma, and then the connecting vowel, primary, middle, or passive ending. And we have looked at those already with the present middle passive indicative, mai, sai, tai, metha, sitha, ntai. And again, that is what we have right here. Exactly the same for the future. There's no change here in these endings. There's no change in the connecting vowel. With the future, we just add that sigma between the stem and the connecting vowel. So our future middle indicative, that sigma again, all the way down. You see it. That is our key. And now this pattern we have noticed already. The sigma drops out because it's between two vowels, called an intervocalic sigma. Again, that alpha forces the epsilon to become, yes, you see it right here, that eta and the circumflex over the top. The middle here, we have kind of an active translation in these slides, but we may want to go something like, you will go for yourself, or I will go for myself. You will go for yourself. There's a reflexive kind of idea, that self-interest or self-reciprocation in the activity. When we think about contract vowels and the pattern that we will begin to see with this sigma here, we've noticed already that sigma is kind of an interesting letter, isn't it? In the square of stops that we'll recall just in a moment, if we have a sigma that bumps up against a consonant like a tau, reverse our order here, we have a tau, and then we have a sigma after it, it can kick that tau right off. But if the sigma is between a couple of vowels like epsilon and alpha, it's going to drop out. The sigma gets our attention. Just need to watch what it's doing. And when that sigma comes after a contract vowel like alpha, epsilon, and omicron, it forces that vowel to lengthen. And we see here the lengthening of alpha to eta, epsilon also to eta, and omicron to omega. So sigma is strong. It can kick something like a tau right off of the word. Can make kappa, gamma, or chi become an xi. So it's strong, but when it's between two vowels, it'll drop off. But if it is after a contract vowel, as it is here and here after these contract vowels, it forces that contract vowel that precedes it to lengthen. Our square stops again. That sigma comes up against a phi, a beta, or p, becomes psi. I noted already that tau, delta, or theta, it just kicks it right out of the way, and sigma only, and then xi with kappa, gamma, or chi plus sigma. This is the result. So it's any one of these letters followed by a sigma, and this is the result. Our master verb chart, I will continue to put this up and update it. Mounts has it for you there. Just a good way to review and have a full perspective on the verb. Vocab, the root, again, has the asterisk always, and I will note that for you. Now, many times, and here, with a noun, it's actually the noun stem that has the asterisk. Same here, but with the verb, this is the root with the asterisk. The verb stem does not have an asterisk here, so genao is our stem. And with the noun, the asterisk is the stem with nouns. With genao, the idea of generate and give birth, zao, zu, pretty easy. Basilica, a large stately building often used for judicial verdicts in the ancient world. Continue to think through whatever bridge mechanisms might be helpful for you. I want to draw just one final note here to pistis and basileus. The word basileus declines like pistis does. The idea of the iota, consonantal iota here, acting as if it is a third declension noun. And you can go back and review that in mounts. But pistis, and in the genitive, it's pisteos, just as we have here with basileus. And the pattern for basileus to be in each of the case endings is exactly the same as pistis. It's the same ending pattern. So in the nominative and accusative singular, the ending is epsilon iota sigma. And you'll want to just be aware of that and the change of pattern there. Continue to press on by looking at the future. We've got the active and middle here. Again, the big picture to review with the future is the sigma tense formative. This is a principle that we will see for the next several weeks, that there are tense formatives that are included in words and help to form them. Here with the future, it is the sigma.